My name is Victoria. I am 28 years old, and on what should have been the happiest morning of my life, my parents betrayed me in a way I could never have imagined. The sun was rising over Lake Michigan. I stood in the hotel suite that overlooked the water, my heart pounding with excitement because this was my wedding day. I had dreamt of this moment for years. I was supposed to be glowing radiant and filled with joy. Instead, within the first hour, my world collapsed. My younger sister called. Her voice was hesitant, shaky, as though she carried a weight she did not want to deliver. She said, "Victoria, Mom and Dad, they are not here. They boarded a plane to Hawaii this morning." I laughed at first, thinking it had to be a mistake. Who would miss their daughter's wedding for a vacation? But then came the second blow. They had left something for me at my apartment, a package. They wanted me to open it before I walked down the aisle. By the time my bridesmaids arrived, I was sitting on the bathroom floor, barely able to breathe. My best friend Jess rushed to my apartment to retrieve the package. When it was placed in my hands, I knew it was bad, but nothing prepared me for what I saw inside. My wedding dress, the one I had chosen with so much care, was burned. Charred silk, melted beads, the smell of smoke clinging to the fabric. Pinned to the ruin was a note in my father's handwriting. "Let us see how you get married now. Maybe next time you will remember where your loyalties should lie." At that moment, something inside me cracked. My parents had not simply refused to come. They had actively tried to destroy the most important day of my life. This was no accident, no misunderstanding. It was an act of cruelty, deliberate and sharp. I felt as if my chest was caving in. I asked myself, what kind of parents would do this to their own child? What did I ever do to deserve this kind of hatred? The truth is, the seeds had been planted long before that morning. My childhood had been shaped by their rigid rules, endless criticism, and the shadow of a younger sister who could do no wrong. They had always demanded perfection while giving only conditional love in return. And now, on the day I should have been radiant in white, they had left me humiliated, broken, and empty. But this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of something far more powerful. Because while my parents tried to destroy me, they underestimated the strength of the family I was about to marry into the family who would stand beside me when my own turned their backs. Even now, as I share this story with you, I know some of you watching have faced families that tried to dim your light. You know what it is like to crave approval, but receive judgment instead. If you have ever stood against that darkness, you will understand the fire that rose in me that morning. And if you have ever broken free, you will know why I refused to let their cruelty define me. This is the story of how my wedding day became both the worst and the best day of my life. The day my parents abandoned me, and the day I finally learned that family is not about blood, it is about love, respect, and loyalty. The truth about my parents is that their betrayal on my wedding day did not come out of nowhere. It was the final act in a long history of control, criticism, and conditional love. From the time I was a child, our suburban Chicago home looked perfect to anyone passing by. The lawn was always trimmed, the windows spotless, the living room arranged as if ready for a magazine shoot. But perfection was not just about the house, it was demanded of me. My father, a bank manager, and my mother, an administrative assistant, cared more about appearances than feelings. If I left a sweater on the couch, my mother scolded me as though I had ruined her reputation. If I spoke out of turn, my father's glare silenced me before I could finish. No matter what I achieved, it was never enough. An A- on a test, why not an AA solo in the school choir? Don't get ahead of yourself. Even when I cleaned my room top to bottom, my mother would run her finger along a shelf hunting for dust. Their approval always dangled out of reach just far enough to keep me chasing. Meanwhile, my younger sister Audrey lived in a different universe. She was 4 years younger and treated like a star. A B on her report card earned ice cream. Forgetting chores was brushed aside with a smile. When she sang off-key at the school concert, my parents gushed about her natural talent. I stood there, invisible, the scapegoat to her golden child. Every time I pointed out the double standard, my parents turned it back on me. Why can't you just be grateful? We sacrificed everything for you. That phrase, "we sacrificed everything," was their favorite weapon. It reminded me daily that love was something I owed them, not something freely given. The message was clear: my worth depended on obedience and achievement. Any independence was labeled selfish. Any failure was proof that I was unworthy. I remember the day I got accepted into Northwestern University. It should have been a triumph. I walked into the kitchen, letter in hand, my heart racing with pride. My father read it, nodded, and said, "Too bad it's not a full scholarship. We'll have to cover the difference." No congratulations, no hug. Just another reminder that I was a burden. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I would ever hear them say they were proud of me. That constant pressure shaped me. Even in college, as I worked hard in marketing classes, their voices stayed in my head. Every success felt smaller because I imagined their disapproval. Every setback echoed as failure. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had stopped sharing my personal life with them. It was safer to stay silent than to see my happiness crushed under their judgment. But silence did not erase the damage. I still carried their voices with me, the endless comparisons to cousins and neighbors. My cousin James in investment banking, making 6 figures, my mother never forgot to remind me. A neighbor's daughter buying a house, I was asked why I had not done the same. Their approval was always directed elsewhere, never at me. This is the foundation of the story. This is why, when they burned my wedding dress, the pain cut so deeply. It was not just about the ashes in that box. It was about decades of being told I was not enough, decades of love used as a weapon. Their absence on my wedding day was not a surprise. It was the final proof of what I had known all along. And maybe you know this feeling too. Maybe you grew up under the same microscope, constantly measured, constantly diminished. Maybe you have spent years trying to earn love that never comes. If you recognize yourself in this, leave a comment below. Tell me what it felt like, because your story matters. And if you want to hear more stories like this, make sure you subscribe. Together, we can remind each other that we are not alone. The truth is, my parents taught me that love could vanish if I stepped out of line. But life had other plans, because just when their approval seemed like the only thing I would ever chase, I met someone who showed me what unconditional love really looked like. Dreams have a way of shrinking when you grow up in a house where ambition is measured against someone else's expectations. When I was a teenager, my heart beat for art history. I wanted to study the masters, walk through galleries, and maybe one day teach others to see beauty the way I did. But in my parents' eyes, art was a hobby, not a career. "You'll never make a living staring at paintings," my father said when I mentioned applying to art programs. My mother's response was sharper. "Do you think we sacrifice so much just so you could waste your life?" Their words stung, but more than that, they carried a threat. If I chose the wrong path, their support would vanish. So I gave up on my dream. I chose marketing instead, a practical major they could tolerate. Even then, they doubted me. "Business is competitive," my father warned. "Are you even smart enough to succeed?" The irony is that I did succeed. I earned top grades, built internships, and eventually landed a job at a respected digital marketing firm in Chicago. Yet every milestone was met with a sigh, a criticism, or a comparison. At Sunday dinners, my achievements were placed beside my cousin James, the investment banker, who already made 6 figures. My mother would glance at me across the table and say, "James just bought a new condo downtown. Isn't that impressive?" The implication was clear. My modest salary and rented apartment were failures no matter how hard I worked. Dating was no different. Every boyfriend I brought home was dissected like a specimen under a microscope. Thomas, my college sweetheart, wanted to become a teacher. Not ambitious enough, my parents declared. Years later, I dated David, who was deeply focused on his career. This time, the verdict was the opposite. He'll never be a good husband if all he cares about is work. No one could win, and by extension, neither could I. The constant invalidation wore me down. I started hiding pieces of myself, dreams, relationships, victories, because it was easier than handing them over to be torn apart. But hiding does not mean healing. Inside, I still longed for their approval, still measured my worth against their reactions. Even as an adult, I found myself sitting in my car before family dinners, practicing what I would say, bracing for the criticism that always came. Therapy was the first time I heard someone name what I had been living through. Dr. Patel listened to me describe the patterns and then said, "That sounds like conditional love. Your parents only value you when you fulfill their expectations. They don't love who you are, only what you do for them." Hearing those words was like being handed a mirror, painful but liberating. I began to see the cycle clearly, the stolen dream of art history, the constant comparisons, the way every choice was framed as either gratitude or betrayal. My life had been shaped by a single lesson: love could be taken away if I disappointed them. And maybe you have been there too. Maybe you have given up on something you loved because your family said it wasn't practical. Maybe you silenced yourself to avoid criticism. Tell me in the comments, what dream did you once bury to keep the peace? Sharing it here might be the first step in taking it back. This is why the burned dress hit so hard. It was not just fabric turned to ash. It was every dream they had dismissed, every choice they had mocked, every reminder that I would never be good enough. And yet in the ruins of that dress, something began to shift. I realized I could not keep living for their approval, because soon I would meet someone who would not just love me for what I achieved, but for who I was. And that changed everything. For most of my 20s, I lived with the quiet ache of knowing that nothing I did would ever be enough. I pushed through long hours at my marketing job building campaigns that gained real traction, yet my parents always found a way to minimize it. At family dinners, my father would say, "That's nice, Victoria, but James just closed another deal on Wall Street." My mother would ask if my projects were real marketing or just posting on the internet. Every word chipped away at my confidence until I began to wonder if they were right. It was Dr. Patel, my therapist, who gave me the language to understand what I had been living through. One afternoon, after I poured out another story of being criticized for choices as small as my hairstyle or as large as my career, she leaned forward and said, "This is conditional love. Your parents love the version of you that fulfills their image, not the person you truly are." Those words settled over me like a heavy blanket. I wanted to protest, to defend them, but deep down, I knew she was right. For years, I had been running on the treadmill of their expectations, sprinting toward a finish line that kept moving further away. The moment I stopped, the moment I failed to keep pace, their love was withdrawn. So I began to set boundaries, timid at first. I moved into an apartment farther from their house, cutting our weekly visits down to twice a month. I stopped sharing details about my personal life, keeping conversations polite but shallow. When my mother pressed for information, I learned to smile and say, "Everything is fine," even when it wasn't. It was not freedom, but it was a start. Building a new life required finding people who saw me not the daughter shaped by obligation, but the woman I was becoming. My college roommate Jess became one of those people. She cheered my successes without measuring them against anyone else. At work, my colleague Martin respected my skills, often telling me I had a sharp instinct for strategy. Their belief in me slowly began to stitch together what my parents had torn apart. Still, I carried the old voices in my head. Even when I won praise at work, I heard my father asking if it was enough. Even when friends told me I was kind and loyal, I imagined my mother rolling her eyes. Those ghosts followed me everywhere, whispering that I was only as good as my last accomplishment. And maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've tried to draw boundaries, but the guilt drags you back. Maybe you've built a life outside your family, but still hear the echoes of their disappointment. If you've been there, hit subscribe. It's time we remind each other that breaking free is not betrayal, it's survival. The hardest part was accepting that my parents would never change. Dr. Patel reminded me, "You cannot force someone to give what they don't have." I wanted to believe that one day they would finally see me, finally say the words I had longed to hear. "We're proud of you, Victoria." But waiting for that moment was like waiting for rain in the desert. It kept me thirsty, desperate, and stuck. I was 27 when I finally whispered to myself, I am allowed to choose peace over approval. It was a small sentence, but it felt like a rebellion. I didn't know it then, but that choice set the stage for everything that came next. Because the moment I stopped begging for scraps of love from my parents, I made room for something else, something better. Soon after, at a gala I hadn't even wanted to attend, I met a man who would show me what unconditional acceptance really looked like. A man who listened, laughed, and looked at me as though I was already enough. And with him, everything began to change. Maka. It happened on a night when love was the last thing on my mind. I had been invited to a fundraising gala for the Chicago Children's Hospital, and my company asked me to attend as part of the marketing team. I remember standing near the silent auction table, swirling a glass of champagne, trying to look engaged while counting the minutes until I could leave. The room buzzed with conversations about quarterly budgets, stock portfolios, and social connections. I felt invisible, trapped in a world that worshipped appearances, the very world I had been raised to navigate, but never felt at home in. That's when I heard a voice beside me. "You look as bored as I feel." I turned and found myself staring into warm brown eyes and an easy smile. His name was Alex. He wore a simple suit that didn't scream wealth or status. He wasn't there to impress anyone, and that alone made me curious. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, laughing despite myself. Only to another person hiding at the least popular auction table, he replied, gesturing at the collection of handmade pottery we were pretending to admire. Something about him felt different. He didn't rush to talk about his career or accomplishments. Instead, he asked about mine, and when I answered, he actually listened. We spent the rest of the evening talking about everything except business. I laughed more in those few hours than I had in months. When he asked for my number at the end of the night, giving it to him felt natural, not like a performance. Our first date was a week later at a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park. He drove a modest sedan, wore jeans and a button-down shirt, and looked completely at ease. For the first time, I was sitting across from a man who wasn't trying to prove anything. He talked about his love for design, about hiking trips, about books he couldn't put down. Not once did he brag, compare, or belittle. I remember thinking, this feels different. This feels safe. Over the next few months, Alex became a steady presence in my life. When I hesitated to share stories about my family, he didn't press. When I finally did, his response was simple and powerful. "They missed out on knowing the amazing woman you are. That's their loss." No pity, no judgment, just acceptance. It was a revelation. After years of conditional love, here was someone who saw me without a checklist. Someone who didn't demand perfection, but celebrated the person I already was. And maybe that's what makes love so transformative. It doesn't erase the scars, but it teaches you that you don't have to keep bleeding for someone to notice. If you've ever met someone who reminded you of your worth, someone who made you feel seen, take a moment and subscribe. Join this community of stories because together we can honor the people who lift us instead of breaking us. Looking back, I realized that meeting Alex was not just chance. It was the moment life asked me a question: would I keep living for my parents' approval, or would I allow myself to be loved as I was? The answer unfolded slowly through late-night conversations, quiet dinners, and moments where Alex's patience healed what years of criticism had broken. And then came the day when he revealed something that shook me, not because it made me doubt him, but because it proved just how rare his humility truly was. It was on a quiet weekend trip to Michigan when the truth came out. We had been walking along the lake shore, the water stretching wide and endless, when Alex casually mentioned his family's business. He said it the way someone might mention a grocery list. "My family owns a jewelry company. I work in design and sourcing." I almost didn't catch it, but something about the name he used, Pfizer and Sons, stopped me in my tracks. I turned to him, sand crunching under my shoes, and said, "Wait, Pfizer and Sons, the goldsmiths. The ones with stores in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles." Alex shifted uncomfortably, as if he regretted letting it slip. "Yes, My great-grandfather started it in 1920. My father runs it now. I stared at him stunned. The Pfizer family wasn't just a business. They were a legacy. Their jewelry graced magazines, adorned celebrities, carried generations of wealth and reputation. For a moment, my mind spun. All those dinners, all those walks, all those modest jeans and button-down shirts. And this was the man sitting across from me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because people treat you differently when they think you have money," he said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. They either want something from you or they assume you're spoiled and entitled. I would rather be known for who I am, not for what my family owns. His honesty floored me. Here was a man who could have led with power, with wealth, with the glitter of diamonds and emeralds. Instead, he led with humility. He had built our relationship on laughter, listening, and shared moments, not on a family empire. And in that moment, I loved him more. Because Alex had given me something no one else ever had: proof that I was enough, even when no one was watching. When I finally told my best friend Jess about it, she nearly dropped her coffee. "You're dating Alex Pfizer." Do you realize what that means? But I did. I realized exactly what it meant. It meant my parents would judge him even harder. It meant they would see dollar signs before they saw his heart. And I dreaded the day I would have to introduce him to them. Because if there's one thing I knew about my parents, it was this. They measured everything in status. And they would never believe that love could be built on anything else. But I also knew something else: Alex was worth the storm. And maybe you faced that storm too. Maybe you've loved someone who your family refused to see for who they were. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to defend your relationship against unfair judgment. And if you believe that love should never be measured by money or status. Subscribe and stand with me. What Alex didn't know, what he couldn't yet imagine, was that soon he would meet my parents. And when he did, their reaction would confirm everything I feared and test everything we had built together. The first dinner with my parents was a test I had dreaded for months. I had rehearsed every word, every gesture, but nothing could have prepared me for the chill that filled the room the moment Alex walked in. My father's eyes scanned him like he was a dossier. My mother's lips pressed, thin, hiding disapproval in polite silence. Alex, however, remained calm. He shook hands, smiled, and thanked them for having us over. He asked questions about their lives, listened carefully, responded warmly. Everything about him radiated confidence without arrogance. Then my father leaned back in his chair and said the words I had expected, dreaded, and yet hoped would never come. "So what exactly do you do at this jewelry company? Do you actually sell rings?" His tone carried a subtle edge, implying that Alex was nothing more than a retail worker, a clerk, in a world of real businessmen. Alex didn't flinch. "I work in design and sourcing. I oversee materials and craftsmanship," he replied evenly. He did not correct my father's assumption about status. He simply stated the truth. There was no arrogance, no need to prove himself. He understood the room, and more importantly, understood me. My mother chimed in, attempting to sound supportive, but the words were hollow. "I suppose it's nice that you have a job, Victoria," she said, glancing at me. There was that familiar sting, the way she measured my happiness against some invisible standard. I felt my chest tighten, the old voice in my head, whispering that I would never be enough, no matter what I accomplished, or who I chose to love. Through it all, Alex remained my anchor. His hand brushed mine under the table, a silent gesture of solidarity. I squeezed back a quiet affirmation that we were in this together. I realized then that he wasn't just my partner. He was my shield, my safe harbor in a sea of judgment. It was humbling to see how differently someone could be treated and yet remain completely unaffected by the need to prove anything. Alex had grown up understanding that respect was earned, not demanded. And in that room filled with my parents' skepticism and subtle contempt, he embodied everything I had longed for in a family: support, understanding, and unwavering dignity. Even as I absorbed the humiliation, I felt a flicker of strength ignite within me. For the first time, I recognized that my parents' opinions, while impactful, no longer had the power to define me. I was beginning to see that my worth was not determined by their judgment or by anyone else's measure of success. By the end of the evening, I knew the path ahead would not be easy. My parents' criticism would continue, and their expectations would always loom. But I also knew that I had an ally in Alex, someone who saw me, believed in me, and loved me unconditionally. That knowledge changed everything. And maybe you've experienced this too, standing in a room where you feel small, judged, invisible. Maybe you've watched someone you love face scrutiny that isn't fair. If you've ever been in that position, take a moment to like and subscribe. Join a community that supports choosing love and respect over approval and judgment. As we left the dinner that night, I felt a mixture of relief and resolve. Relief that Alex had handled everything with grace, and resolve that I would no longer bend to the impossible standards set by my parents. Their power over me was waning, and with Alex by my side, I could finally envision a life defined by choice, not obligation. By the time 18 months had passed since our first meeting, Alex and I had built a relationship founded on patience, trust, and authenticity. Each shared laugh, late-night conversation, and quiet moment had strengthened our bond. He knew my past, my fears, and my family's patterns, yet he never judged me. Instead, he listened and affirmed me, showing that love could be unconditional. It was on a private evening at the Art Institute's rooftop, overlooking the sparkling city lights of Chicago, that he asked me to sit down beside him. I had no idea what he was planning. The city hummed quietly beneath us, and the wind carried the promise of summer. "Victoria," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You have shown me what it means to be brave and true to yourself despite every obstacle." I felt my heart tighten. Every word carried weight, echoing the struggles I had faced for years, under the weight of judgment and conditional love. He continued, "I want to spend my life supporting your dreams the way you have supported mine. Will you marry me?" I gasped, tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I whispered through happy tears. The moment was more than a proposal. It was a validation of everything I had fought for, every boundary I had set, every step I had taken to claim my own worth. The ring he had designed was exquisite, an emerald-cut diamond, set in platinum adorned with tiny sapphires, my birthstone woven into the band. Every detail reflected thoughtfulness and intimacy, a symbol not of wealth or status, but of understanding and shared values. It was perfect not because it was expensive, but because it represented the commitment he had to knowing me and loving me for who I truly was. That night, I reflected on the contrast between Alex's love and my parents' conditional affection. Here was a man who gave freely, who valued me for my character, not my accomplishments or compliance. It was a revelation love did not have to come with rules, judgments, or expectations. And as I held Alex's hand, I realized that the life I wanted to build would be radically different from the one I had known. My parents' influence, their need for control, and their arbitrary standards would no longer dictate my happiness. With Alex, I could envision a partnership based on mutual respect, understanding, and authentic care. Maybe you've experienced a love like this too, or maybe you're searching for it. If you believe in choosing relationships that honor your worth, comment below and share your story. And don't forget to subscribe to join others who are reclaiming love and self-respect in their lives. That proposal was more than a promise of marriage. It was a turning point, the moment I knew I could finally step out from under the shadow of my parents' judgment. It was the affirmation that love could be empowering rather than conditional, that choosing the right partner could help heal old wounds. Over the next weeks, as we shared the news with friends and planned the wedding, the tension with my parents grew. They could not hide their disdain for Alex, for me, and for the choices I was making. Yet every interaction with him reminded me that my happiness did not require their approval. I was no longer the girl bending to meet impossible standards. I was Victoria, loved, seen, and supported. And that night on the rooftop beneath the stars, with the ring glinting in the city lights, I understood a truth I had been running from my whole life. The courage to choose oneself is the first step toward freedom. As the wedding approached, Alex and I began planning what we wanted: an intimate ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden, surrounded by those we loved and cared for. We envisioned a day that reflected who we were, not the expectations of anyone else. Every detail was chosen with intention: the flowers, the music, the menu. It was meant to be a celebration of love and partnership, not a show of wealth or status. But the closer the day came, the more the tension with my parents escalated. Every decision seemed to provoke them. When Alex's parents offered to help cover the costs, my mother's face darkened. "We can pay for our own daughter's wedding," she insisted, pride making every word sharp. She could not see that the offer was a gift, a gesture of love, not a critique of our family's finances. My father chimed in with thinly veiled annoyance. "It's just that people might think we can't afford it," he said, as if their image mattered more than my happiness. I tried to reason, explaining that Alex's family wanted to share in our joy, not imply any inadequacy on our part. But my attempts fell on deaf ears. Every suggestion I made, every compromise we proposed, was met with criticism. Even the choice of my wedding dress became a battlefield. When we went to the boutique and I picked a gown with delicate beadwork, my mother's reaction was devastating. $10,000 for a dress you'll wear once, she exclaimed loudly, turning heads in the store. Her disapproval stung, not because of the price, but because of the underlying message: my judgment, my taste, and my choices were wrong. By contrast, shopping with Catherine, Alex's mother, was a completely different experience. She supported me without judgment, encouraged me without imposing, and made me feel beautiful in a way I had never experienced with my own mother. It was a small but profound reminder of the type of family I could choose, a family that nurtured rather than controlled. Through all this, I realized the wedding was more than an event. It had become a test of boundaries, of courage, and of choosing love over approval. I could feel the pressure to appease my parents, to ensure they felt included, but I knew that bending to their will would only diminish the joy of the day. I had learned from years of therapy and personal growth that standing up for myself was not selfish, it was necessary. And as I planned each element, I kept thinking about the day itself, the moment I would walk down the aisle, and the support I would feel from Alex, from his parents, and from friends who truly cared. The stakes had never been higher. Could I fully embrace the happiness I had fought so hard to achieve, knowing my parents' disapproval would still hang in the air? If you've ever faced the impossible challenge of standing firm against family criticism, hit subscribe now and join a community that understands what it takes to claim your happiness. Despite the mounting tension, there was also excitement, anticipation, and a sense of empowerment. Every decision, every detail was a declaration I would not let anyone's judgment dictate my life. This wedding was about love, respect, and authenticity. It was about breaking free from the shadows of conditional love and stepping into a life I chose for myself. And even as my parents' voices threatened to cast doubt, I held on to Alex's unwavering support. He reminded me every day that we were in this together, that their opinions could not define our joy, and that the wedding would be everything we dreamed of, regardless of who attended or who tried to control it. The stage was set, the flowers were arranged, the music chosen, and the guests invited. But the biggest question loomed over us. How would my parents react when faced with the reality of our love, our choices, and the life we had built together? The night of the proposal still feels like a dream I can replay in my mind endlessly. Alex had asked me to meet him at the Art Institute's rooftop for a private dinner, a location that overlooked the city lights of Chicago shimmering like a sea of stars. I thought it would be a simple celebration of our time together, a quiet evening to reflect on everything we had shared over the past 18 months. We dined under soft lights, the distant hum of traffic far below, creating a backdrop that felt both intimate and monumental. Alex reached across the table, his hand covering mine, and I felt a warmth that anchored me despite the nervous flutter in my chest. He looked into my eyes, steady and unwavering, and spoke words that carried the weight of all our experiences. "Victoria," he said, his voice firm but tender, "you have shown me what it means to be brave, to be yourself, and to love without compromise. I want to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams as you have supported mine." I could feel tears rising, but I held them back, not wanting to break the moment. Then he slid a small velvet box across the table. I hesitated only briefly before opening it. Inside rested an emerald-cut diamond set in platinum with tiny sapphires, my birthstone embedded delicately along the band. The design was thoughtful, intimate, and entirely unique. It wasn't a display of wealth. It was a reflection of his understanding of me. "I want to spend my life with you," he continued, dropping to one knee. "Will you marry me?" I was overwhelmed not just by the proposal, but by the realization of how far we had come. This was a man who had never judged me, who had loved me not for my achievements or status, but for who I was. My heart swelled with gratitude, relief, and an unshakable certainty. I whispered yes, tears spilling freely now, a mixture of happiness and the release of years of tension, fear, and doubt. That evening was a turning point. Alex's gesture was more than a proposal. It was proof that love could exist without conditions. It was a sharp contrast to the love I had sought from my parents all my life, a love that had always come with strings attached. Here I felt seen, respected, and valued in a way that I had never known. As we embraced, I thought about all the battles I had fought to arrive at this moment, the criticism, the comparisons, the endless striving for approval. Every scar from my childhood, every slight from my parents, suddenly seemed to have led me to this clarity that my worth was never determined by anyone's judgment but my own. And in that realization, I found freedom. Freedom to love fully, freedom to choose joy, and freedom to step into a future that I would shape with Alex. It was also a reminder that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it is simply the willingness to accept love when it is offered without conditions. If you've ever experienced a love that reminds you of your worth, that challenges you to believe in yourself, leave a comment below. Share your story and let others know that unconditional love exists. And if you want to follow this journey, subscribe. Let's explore together how choosing love can transform life. After that night, our planning intensified. The engagement was not just a personal milestone, it was a statement that we would create our own family narrative, one built on respect, support, and authenticity, rather than fear, judgment, or obligation. I knew the upcoming wedding would test us again, but now I faced it with a confidence I had never felt before. With Alex by my side, I felt ready to confront the challenges, the criticisms, and even the deliberate obstacles that my parents would place in our path. Because for the first time, I knew the difference between love that nurtures and love that controls, and I had chosen the former without hesitation. The morning of the wedding arrived with a golden sunrise over Lake Michigan, the kind that made the city shimmer like magic. I woke up early in our suite at the Four Seasons, my heart fluttering with excitement, anticipation, and a quiet, nervous energy. Today was meant to be the happiest day of my life, the day I would marry Alex, the man who had shown me what unconditional love truly felt like. I was pouring my first cup of coffee when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Audrey. Her voice was uncharacteristically hesitant, almost breaking as she spoke. "Victoria, I don't know how to say this, but Mom and Dad, they're gone." I blinked, confusion and disbelief rooting me to the spot. "Gone? What do you mean gone? Are they at breakfast or something?" I asked, trying to reason with myself, hoping this was some mistake. "No, Victoria. They flew to Hawaii this morning," Audrey continued. "Dad booked the trip weeks ago. They asked me to tell you they won't be at the wedding. Mom said it's because you made your choice to side with Alex's family over ours. Dad said you needed to learn a lesson about loyalty." The coffee cup slipped from my hands, shattering against the floor. Heat surged through me, shock, anger, disbelief. Their absence wasn't because of an emergency. It wasn't a sudden illness or a work obligation. This was deliberate, a calculated act of spite. And then Audrey added something I wasn't prepared for. "There's a package at your apartment. Dad insisted you get it this morning." My stomach sank. My parents had left something for me, their final lesson, and I could only imagine the cruelty waiting inside. By the time my bridesmaids arrived, I was curled on the bathroom floor, tears streaking my face. Jess took charge, immediately sending someone to retrieve the package while offering comfort in quiet, steady words. The room was filled with tension, love, and disbelief. Catherine arrived shortly after, enveloping me in a hug so warm I couldn't hold back sobs. "Victoria, it's going to be okay. Alex loves you. We love you. This wedding will happen with or without them." When the package finally arrived, I opened it slowly, dread and anger rising with each tear of the wrapping. Inside was my wedding dress, the gown I had painstakingly chosen with Catherine's help. It was ruined. The silk was charred, delicate beadwork melted into an unrecognizable mess. Pinned to the ruin was a handwritten note from my father. "Let us see how you get married now. Maybe next time you will remember where your loyalties should lie." I gasped, horror and grief flooding through me. They had destroyed my dress to sabotage my wedding. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth. Jess swore softly, and even the makeup artist froze mid-gesture. I whispered, barely able to speak. "They burned my wedding dress. They actually burned it." But amidst the shock, something shifted inside me. Years of seeking their approval, of bending to their will, of carrying the weight of conditional love, it all culminated in this moment. And for the first time, I realized that their judgment, their control, and their malice could not define me. Catherine knelt beside me and spoke calmly but firmly. "Victoria, this is horrible, inexcusable, but it will not stop today from being your day. Trust me, we will fix this." Within the hour, Diane, a friend and boutique owner, delivered a selection of designer gowns to the hotel suite. Among them was a Vera Wang creation, perfect in every way, requiring only minor alterations. Alex called soon after, his voice tight with anger for me. "Whatever you decide today, I support you. If you want to postpone, we can. If you want to elope instead, I'm ready. This is your choice." That was the moment I felt a profound sense of power. I was choosing my happiness, my love, my life, despite the deliberate attempts to ruin it. I would marry Alex today, and nothing could stop us. After the initial shock of the burned dress, a strange calm began to settle over me. Catherine had quickly taken control, calling Diane, her friend and boutique owner in downtown Chicago, to arrange a replacement gown. Within an hour, a selection of designer dresses arrived at the hotel suite, each one more stunning than the last. I was nervous, exhausted, and still raw from the morning's betrayal. But as I slipped into the Vera Wang gown Diane had prepared, I felt a renewed sense of power. This dress wasn't just fabric and beads, it was a symbol of resilience, of taking back control over a day that my parents had tried to destroy. Alex was there every step of the way, his hand firm in mine, reminding me that this day was about us. "Victoria, I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "We can do this today however you want it. Nothing they did changes us." His calm confidence grounded me. I realized that this was the first wedding I was truly choosing for myself and not for anyone else's approval. While the boutique seamstress worked quickly to make minor alterations, my bridesmaids helped me with hair and makeup. Their steady support reminded me of everything I had built around myself, the people who loved me, for who I was not, what I could provide or achieve. When the dress fit perfectly, hugging me in all the right places, I felt a surge of strength. The morning's terror and heartbreak melted into determination and excitement. I would walk down that aisle as the woman I had fought to become, but there was still one pressing question: who would walk me down the aisle? My father's absence left a hollow space, a silent reminder of the cruelty he had inflicted. I paused, considering, and then James Alex's father knelt beside me. "It would be my honor," he said gently. "But only if it feels right to you, Victoria." I could feel tears prickling the corners of my eyes. The gesture moved me deeply. Alex's family had shown me more warmth and kindness in a few years than my parents had in 28. With the dress secured, makeup freshly applied, and my heart full of resolve, I prepared to leave for the botanic garden. The air was thick with the scent of June bloom, sunlight casting a golden glow across the glass-enclosed pathways. Every step I took was measured, deliberate, and confident. I wasn't just walking toward Alex, I was walking away from the pain of the past, reclaiming my right to joy. The hotel staff and our friends handled everything seamlessly, understanding the urgency and gravity of the morning. As I stood at the entrance to the garden, James at my side, I felt an unexpected serenity. The flowers, the smiles of friends, the gentle hum of the string quartet. It all created a sanctuary that no one could invade. In that moment, I understood that strength is not born from the absence of adversity, but from how we respond to it. My parents had tried to break me, to humiliate me, to assert control over the most important day of my life. And yet here I was, standing tall, surrounded by love and support, ready to embrace a new chapter. If you've ever faced betrayal or deliberate sabotage, remember that strength comes from choosing yourself. Leave a comment below about a moment when you overcame someone else's attempt to control your life, and don't forget to subscribe to follow stories of resilience and triumph. With the gown fitted, the veil in place, and my confidence restored, I took a deep breath. Today I would marry the man I loved, surrounded by people who had chosen to stand beside me, and nothing, not even my parents' cruelty, could take that away. The ceremony itself was nothing short of magical. The Chicago Botanic Garden had transformed into a summer sanctuary, with flowers in full bloom and greenery creating a natural cathedral of peace and beauty. As I walked down the aisle on James's arm, my heart was steady. My eyes locked on Alex. The morning's heartbreak, the burned dress, the betrayal, the absence of my parents had not vanished entirely, but it had been replaced by something far stronger: empowerment, love, and the support of people who truly cared. Alex stood beneath an arch of white roses and ivy, his eyes filled with unspoken reassurance. Every guest's smile, every tear, every gesture of love reinforced a truth I had long fought to accept. Family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by presence, care, and acceptance. Today, I had chosen a family that supported me unconditionally, and it felt like coming home. The ceremony was brief, but profoundly moving. Alex's vows reflected the years we had shared and the challenges we had overcome. Victoria, you have shown me what true strength looks like. I promise to be your partner, your champion, and your safe harbor today and always. His voice was steady, unwavering, and full of emotion. When it was my turn, my voice trembled slightly, but the words came from the depth of my heart. Alex, you accept me completely as I am. I promise to cherish that gift and return it to you every day of our lives together. During the reception, the warmth of Alex's family enveloped me. Catherine and James welcomed me not just as a daughter-in-law, but as their daughter in every sense that mattered. Catherine stood during the toast, her eyes glistening with tears. When Alex brought Victoria into our lives, we knew immediately that he had found his perfect match. Her kindness, intelligence, and strength of character shone from the very first moment. Today, we do not just gain a daughter-in-law, we gain a daughter. Hearing those words, I felt a healing I had never anticipated. The wounds inflicted by my parents, the criticism, the manipulations, the burn of rejection began to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging and unconditional love. It was a transformative moment. I realized that family could indeed be chosen. It was not about who gave birth to you, but about who showed up for you, who lifted you, and who respected and honored your worth. Even during the father-daughter dance, the contrast was stark. I danced with James Alex's father to The Way You Look Tonight by Frank Sinatra, a song filled with warmth and nostalgia. As we moved across the floor, he whispered, "Victoria, we consider you our daughter, not just in law, but in our hearts." His words, sincere and grounding, filled the spaces my parents had left hollow for 28 years. Throughout the evening, friends and family approached, complimenting the dress, the venue, and the joy that radiated from Alex and me. Nobody knew the full story of the morning's drama, and I chose to keep it that way. My focus was on the present, the love surrounding me, the life I had built, and the family I had chosen. If you've ever had to step away from people who only bring toxicity into your life, take a moment to acknowledge your strength. Share your experiences in the comments, and subscribe to follow stories where resilience and self-respect triumph over conditional love. By the end of the night, I understood a truth I had fought to accept for so long. Family is defined by love, respect, and support, not by blood. And in choosing Alex, his family, and myself, I had finally embraced a family that would always see me, honor me, and nurture me without conditions. A few days after the wedding, the storm I had anticipated finally arrived. My parents, who had abandoned me on the most important day of my life and burned my wedding dress, appeared at my apartment unannounced. Their faces were unreadable, as if they had rehearsed neutrality, but couldn't completely hide their anger and entitlement. "Victoria, we need to talk." My mother began pushing past me into the living room. My father's eyes swept over the space with quiet judgment. "So this is where you live," surprisingly modest, considering he said. His tone carried disdain. I took a deep breath and faced them directly, considering what I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Considering that you married into the Fisher family," my father replied bluntly. "Why didn't you tell us who they really are?" Alex stepped forward, placing a protective hand gently on my shoulder. "With all due respect, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, your actions on our wedding day, leaving Victoria alone and destroying her dress, mean you forfeited any right to dictate how she shares information about her life. This is between her and me, not a business transaction." My mother's voice rose. "You married into wealth and didn't think it mattered to tell your own parents?" "I didn't hide anything," I said firmly. "Alex doesn't define himself by his family's business. Our love isn't about money, and neither am I. This conversation isn't about wealth, it's about your actions. You abandoned me, destroyed my wedding dress, and left me humiliated on the most important day of my life." My father's face darkened, his patience thinning. "We made mistakes, but families forgive. It's time to move forward." I shook my head. "There is no moving forward without accountability. Your definition of forgiveness is not mine. You think I should forget that you tried to destroy one of the most significant moments of my life simply because it suited you. That's not forgiveness. That's opportunism." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're being dramatic. We are your parents. Family is forever." "Family is forever," I echoed, voice steady, "but love isn't conditional. You have only ever loved the version of me that served your needs. Today, I choose myself. I will not subject Alex or myself or our future child to that toxicity. You cannot control me anymore. You cannot dictate my life or my happiness." Alex squeezed my hand, a silent show of support and solidarity. I felt the power of having someone beside me who validated my boundaries, who honored my right to say no to abuse, and who believed in the life I wanted to build. My parents exchanged a glance, clearly unprepared for this Victoria, the daughter who would not bend, who would not apologize for choosing respect, dignity, and love over fear and compliance. "We want to meet the Fishers," my father said finally. "Surely that is not too much to ask now that you're married." I looked at Alex, who nodded subtly. "They saw what you did to my wife. They saw the dress. I don't think a meeting is appropriate under these circumstances." My mother's voice hardened. "You are poisoning them with your side of the story." "There is no side of the story," I said firmly. "There is only the truth. And the truth is that I have chosen myself and a family who treats me with love and respect. I will not allow the Pfizers to experience your brand of manipulation. You had your chance to show love unconditionally, and you failed." A heavy silence filled the room. For the first time in my life, I was standing fully in my own power. Alex's presence reminded me that I didn't have to tolerate disrespect even from my parents. Finally, my mother gathered her purse. "When you come to your senses, do not expect a warm welcome. There are consequences for this kind of disrespect." "I am aware of consequences," I said quietly. "I have lived with them my entire life. That ends now. As they left, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The confrontation was brutal, but it was necessary. I had drawn the line. I had claimed my life, my happiness, and my boundaries. For the first time, I understood that choosing oneself is not selfish, it is survival. And as Alex held me that evening, whispering words of pride and reassurance, I realized that this was my victory. Not over them, but over the chains of conditional love that had bound me for decades. I had finally freed myself. The months following our confrontation with my parents were a time of profound change. With Alex by my side, I finally had the space to heal, to process the deep wounds from childhood, and to rebuild my sense of self. Therapy with Dr. Patel helped me untangle the years of manipulation and conditional love, framing the burned dress and my parents' absence as symbolic acts of emotional abuse. I began to understand that my worth had never depended on their approval, and that setting boundaries was not rejection, it was survival. The first holiday season as a married couple was different. Thanksgiving at the Pfizer's home was filled with warmth, laughter, and acceptance. Yet the absence of my parents lingered in my mind, a reminder of what I had lost but could not control. Christmas brought a card from them offering no apology, only a terse suggestion that we put the past behind us for the holidays. I returned it unopened. It was a small but firm act of preserving my peace. Catherine and James never pressured me to reconcile. They never imposed appearances or demanded that I bend to familial expectations. Their love was unconditional, consistent, and restorative. I began to understand that family is not defined by birth, but by respect, care, and shared values. My true inheritance was not wealth or status, it was the example of how to love and support another human being. In January, an unexpected email arrived from Audrey, my younger sister. She had moved out and was taking steps toward independence. She had seen the burned dress at our parents' home, kept like a trophy, and finally realized the truth of what had happened. Her voice was thick with emotion as she wrote about the manipulation she had experienced and how grateful she was to reconnect with me, free from our parents' interference. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure with my sibling. We began rebuilding our relationship coffee dates and honest conversations, replacing years of control and favoritism. Spring brought the news that would change our lives again. I was pregnant. Excitement mingled with anxiety. Would I be a good parent? Could I break the cycles of conditional love? Dr. Patel reminded me that awareness was the first step to breaking patterns. I realized that having a child did not obligate me to reintroduce toxic dynamics into our lives. Alex and I made the decision to shield our child from the patterns that had caused me so much pain. Catherine became a source of wisdom and reassurance as we prepared for our daughter. She shared openly about her own mistakes and uncertainties as a parent, showing me that love includes accountability, humility, and growth. In contrast, my own parents had never modeled these qualities. 2 weeks before my due date, a card from my parents arrived, congratulating us on the baby, but containing no apology or acknowledgement of past harms. Alex and I discussed it and drafted a firm response setting clear boundaries our child would not be exposed to the same patterns of manipulation I had experienced. Respect and accountability would be prerequisites for any involvement. Then on a brilliant October morning, Lily Catherine Pfizer was born. Healthy, beautiful, and perfect with Alex's brown eyes and my stubborn chin. Holding her for the first time, I felt a love unlike anything I had ever known, unconditional, liberating, and empowering. I realized that family could be chosen, nurtured, and cultivated through love, rather than dictated by birth or obligation. The journey from the burned dress to this moment had been painful but transformative. I had lost the family I was born into, but gained a family of choice that taught me what true love looks like. I had learned to value myself, to stand firm, and to protect my child from cycles of conditional love. The legacy I would pass on would be one of self-respect, courage, and love without strings. If you have ever had to distance yourself from toxic family members, remember that you are not alone. Your worth is not determined by those who cannot see it. Walk away when necessary and build a life with people who honor you. Subscribe to this channel to hear more stories of resilience and share your own experiences in the comments. Your courage may inspire someone else to reclaim their freedom and happiness. And as I watch Lily grow, I know that the lessons from our past, the pain, the boundaries, and the courage to choose love wisely will guide her. Family is not just given, it is chosen, nurtured, and honored through care, respect, and unconditional support. That is the legacy I pass on to her, and it is one of freedom, self-respect, and love that cannot be stolen. The days that followed Lily's birth were filled with quiet joy and reflection. As I held her tiny hand in mine, I felt a profound sense of peace that I had never known. Every moment reminded me that the past, the betrayal, the criticism, the conditional love did not define me anymore. I was free to create a family built on trust, respect, and unconditional support. I watched Alex interact with her, gently guiding her first steps, whispering words of encouragement, and celebrating every small milestone. In those moments, I realized that love could be transformative. It could heal wounds, build confidence, and nurture growth in ways I had never experienced as a child. With Alex by my side and the Pfizer family surrounding us with warmth and kindness, I finally understood what true family meant. Reflecting on my own parents, I felt a mixture of sadness and acceptance. Their actions had caused pain and shaped who I was, but they no longer had the power to dictate my happiness. I had chosen boundaries, chosen respect, and chosen love that was mutual and nurturing. I had learned the invaluable lesson that sometimes the healthiest choice is to step away from those who harm us, even when they are family. I wanted Lily to grow up knowing that her worth is inherent, that love is not earned through obedience, and that she has the right to protect her heart. I wrote letters to her filled with promises of support, guidance, and respect for her individuality. I vowed to never weaponize love or withhold it as a tool of control. My past had taught me the importance of self-respect and courage, and these lessons would guide the family I was now building. As the seasons passed, our home was filled with laughter, learning, and unconditional care. We celebrated victories and navigated challenges together, grounded in the principles I had fought so hard to embrace. I knew that the strength I had cultivated would not only sustain me, but also empower Lily to live boldly and authentically. Looking back, I see that every obstacle, the burned dress, the absence of my parents, the repeated attempts to control and manipulate me, was a step toward reclaiming my life. Those moments of pain became lessons of resilience. They taught me to value myself, to demand respect, and to surround myself with people who elevate rather than diminish. Family is not simply who you are born to. Family is chosen. It is defined by care, love, and respect. And as I watch Lily grow, I am grateful for every painful lesson that brought me to this place of peace, strength, and true freedom. Because ultimately, the life I built, the love I now give, and the family I cherish are proof that we can rise above the hurt of the past, reclaim our worth, and create a legacy of unconditional love for generations to come.